Hello and welcome to the NodeXL Weather Report. I'm Steve Bolden with Nixon Nonprofits. I am joined in voice only by my friend Mark Smith from Connected Action. Mark, how are you today?
Doing well. Good to be here, Steve.
Good. So we had a little beta episode of this, and we're still kind of working the bugs up, but what we're looking forward to doing is showing off every week what's available using the NodeXL tool to understand social interactions better. So we picked a couple of topics this week to illustrate some things that we can learn from what's going on with NodeXL. Mark, why don't you go ahead and take away to our first one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the interest. So we're going to start with the word nonprofit, and we'll start here in Twitter, just having searched for the word nonprofit. Clearly, there are many tweets out in the world all mentioning hashtag nonprofit. And if we were to try to read all of those tweets, we might have quite a handful. It would take a while to get a sense of who the key people are, what the key topics are, what hashtags are most frequently mentioned. And so what we're trying to offer is a tool that would offer a kind of overview instead, like a weather map, like an aerial map of a crowd. This is available at NodeXLGraphGallery.org on the web. And I've just taken the time to search for the word nonprofit here. And we can see that there are many topics that are active that have been mapped already in the word nonprofit. In a map itself, hashtag nonprofit, but there are several others. In this discussion today, we'll be looking at the map of the word Mac found and also NP Tech. But at this level, we can already see that there are some interesting patterns here and that they're not all the same, that some of them have these big wagon wheel shapes.
Mark, I think the interesting thing about the tools here is that they're showing you conversations that Twitter is not going to in that list of top tweets that they have if you do the search there. They default to sort of an algorithm of number of people followed maybe or number of times it was shared, which is not the same thing as impact. And I think that being able to use these maps to see, we can talk a little bit more about impact to action.
That's right. You often are seeing in Twitter something like just the mountain tops that you're seeing, the whole landscape here in these images. Twitter might only give you the people at the center, but it won't really give you a sense of the shape of the crowd. Here you can see some of these maps have these big wagon wheel shapes. Many of them have these circle shapes, but some of them have them more prominently. Others have these row and column, these rectangle shapes. Those are individuals with no connections. We'll see that a little bit more clearly in our zoomed in maps of the individual topics. So why don't we start with nonprofit? We're going to look at nonprofit. It has a large group of people who are isolates. It's a brand, if you will. People can say the word nonprofit. But it has a series of clusters or neighborhoods, and it'll be interesting to see who are the people at the center of these neighborhoods. So here, this is the map for hashtag nonprofit from yesterday. And when we look at the map from at the top of the report, you can see that there are many little neighborhoods, each talking about nonprofits, but often with slightly different terms or topics associated with them. So be it fundraising or grants or donors, or changing the world, or charity water, or volunteers. Each of these little neighborhoods is slightly different. And in our report, we're going to provide you with an easy way to get at who the key people who are sitting at the center of those clusters are. These are the mayors or the influencers of your topic. And here they're listed in rank order. These are the top 10. And each of them, we've provided a follow button and a smart tweet button. Each of these people, it's easy to bring a the little follow interface together. You just click that button. Right. And then we have a smart tweet feature, and the smart tweet feature.
Mark, before you get to the smart tweet thing, I want to just jump in on the rest of the vertices here, because again, we're talking about the idea of influencers differently from just big numbers of followers, but a different kind of impact. So this particular one that you're bringing up says ranked by betweenness centrality, which sounds fabulous, but probably most people don't know what in the world betweenness centrality means. So in this particular vertice, what does that mean? How do we know what's useful about that?
Right. In network theory and social network analysis, we have a variety of mathematical tools that allow us to measure essentially the latitude and longitude of a person within a landscape. If a city has a latitude and longitude that the geographers have assigned to it, a social landscape has a centrality score for each person in the network. And it's essentially a measure of how much are you in the middle of things. And we could get into the details, but let's just say you can mathematically measure how much would somebody have to talk to you to talk to somebody else in your network. If you are, for example, the only person who is in accounting, who knows people in marketing, then you are the most between person. Even if somebody else in accounting knows more people in accounting, if they don't know anybody in marketing, then you become more between. How bridge-like are you? That's what.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense in kind of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of way of thinking about how long does it take you to connect to that other people or those people that don't know you yet.
That's right. So these people are the people who don't just have the most followers, because you can see we have the follower account listed here. They're in no particular order. This has 328 followers. This person has 5,000 followers. This has 10,000 followers. So follower account is not the measure. It's something else. It's betweenness centrality. It's how much in this conversation, not talking about wine or going on vacation or going on a cruise ship or buying insurance or buying a car. It's just within the conversation that we observed, which was 2 days, 16 hours, 38 minutes, basically over the weekend from Wednesday to Saturday. So we took a picture, and in that picture, we are able to show these are the people who are at the center of that conversation. And we make it really easy to then follow and communicate with them because they may be important to you and your organization. And if you were hoping to have your message about nonprofits be heard, these people may be the gatekeepers. If you can get them to repeat your message, it will certainly be heard. Whereas, depending on the size of your own followers, you may not have the same ability to move the message. And so engaging with people who already are at the center of the graph seems like a really good strategy.
Right, and other vertices to look at for other reasons, but future episodes coming, so stay tuned, and we'll take a look at more. But we are kind of running a little bit behind where we'd like to be. So I'm asking to kind of move into that NP Tech specialized area rather than the nonprofit general, and talk a little bit about how that makes a difference.
Okay, so here's NP Tech, and NP Tech, you'll notice, has a really different shape. So here's NP Tech. There's a third group, the third largest group. It is the non-connected people. These are people with no connections. You can see that a little bit more clearly here. They said NP Tech, but they did not say anybody else's name. Nobody said their name. So looking at this shape where we have hub and spoke with a ring and another ring and a ring, these are all broadcast patterns. Let's go back to just nonprofit. Was much larger in terms of its isolate community. G1 is the group of people who have no connections. So the word nonprofit is more of a brand than the word NP Tech. And maybe that's not surprising. We also see that these clusters, there are many, many, many little clusters. By comparison, here's NP Tech. We have fewer of those clusters, and they tend to be larger, and we have fewer of the really small ones. Further, we can scroll down and discover who is the mayor of NP Tech, and Dakin Marketing is the mayor of NP Tech. This is Sean Dakin, is the person at the center of this conversation. And if this is a conversation that matters to you, you would certainly want to follow that person. And if you use our smart tweet feature, it would help you suggest words and hashtags you would use in your tweet to Sean that would help him know that you were talking about things that mattered to him. So when we look at these maps,
and as a person who follows nonprofit technology for a living and just a matter of interest, there's a lot of other names further down that list of more followers that I would have thought of first. So really interesting to learn what is that conversation that's really engaging people that's different from the big names that I'm used to hearing. I think that's just a really great example.
Right. So here's Sean, GMU marketing professor, and he cares about nonprofits. And in the last weekend, his content really stretched across the graph in a way that nobody else's content did. He connected more people who would otherwise not be connected versus perhaps one of the more prominent accounts like, TechSoup is a very prominent account, has 40,000 followers. Right. But in this weekend, at that moment, it did not connect as many people, and not just by number, but as diversely as Sean did.
So there's somebody that we want to get to know.
Yeah, and we're essentially using a different measure of social power that can be volatile, which is good because some people change their role within the community depending on what they say. And so this is something that is somewhat resistant to the rich get richer. This can change. You can actually find new people this way rather than just sorting by the follower account, in which case the top 10 won't change that much. So we will also provide you with insights into this discussion. We're going to show you what other hashtags are being talked about. But interestingly, because you can see that there are neighborhoods or communities in this network, it's not all just one group. This group is less connected to this group than, let's say, this group. So there are sort of neighborhoods. There's they're sort of close to the center of town, and then further out there are suburbs for this topic. We can see that in the interactive version of the graph, where you can zoom in and figure out who these people are and what they're talking about by sort of tooltipping over them. This gives you a little bit of better insight into what the conversation is all about. So when we look at the maps, and let's just go back all the way to here, you can see now really important differences in the shapes of these graphs. And in each particular graph, and I'm going to dive in here to the other one we were talking about, the MacArthur Foundation, it really reveals something about who the key people are, what the key topics are, and how this crowd has a shape that's distinct from others. Notice that Mac Found is not really a brand. Here, Group 8 is the group with the people who mention it without saying anybody else's name. And that means that the overwhelming majority of mentions of Mac Found are from the MacArthur Foundation itself. That's what is sitting here at the center of this cluster. And then you could argue the usual suspects. So one challenge you could set for the MacArthur Foundation is, and we would call this a KPI. This is a key performance indicator, grow Group 8. It should be the case that more people mention you without having to retweet you. In some ways, it's a paradox, because the thing you would want to do with the people in Group 8 is to now reach out and connect them. They've mentioned you, and yet nobody mentions them. And so this is an opportunity to bring people into the fold. The paradox is you still would want more members of Group 8 to appear to replace them. If we don't have
to keep widening that circle, to keep having a bigger conversation. But it's really interesting to think about the terms that we're used to thinking about with reaching new audience. And like, well, if I just had the audiences that the MacArthur Foundation did, I'd have an in-depth conversation. People would, well, and maybe not. Maybe the conversation is just somebody with a lot of money said something, and I'm going to retweet it. And there's not a circle. There's not a come back and have that conversation moment, but rather just they get a voice, a bunch of people follow them. Some of those people found that tweet interesting and shared it, but not a lot of back and forth and learning and spinning off into new neighborhoods that you might see in other maps.
Absolutely, and you can see it right here. I mean, it's absolutely the case that there's the MacFound account, and it tweets, and it does get heard. But this does not lead to a conversation. It leads to broadcast. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I should note, and I'm going to open one more page here. If I'm lucky, all will go well. The important thing to note is that there are many kinds of shapes out there, and this I've just linked us to a report at pewinternet.org called "Mapping Twitter Topic Networks from Polarized Crowds to Community Clusters." What we're seeing is that some topics look like this. They look like brands. They have lots and lots of disconnected people. Others look like this. They're broadcasts. One account speaks and many people retweet it. But there are some topics that form unified or tight crowds. These are the communities where lots of people talk to each other. And you might want that pattern, even if you have this pattern. You might want to move from one pattern to another. So that's why we think it would be useful for people to know what pattern they already are. So it would be useful for MacFound to be able to tell, how did the crowd that formed around them, what shape did it form? And how does that compare with, let's say, the Ford Foundation? What about the RWJF? What about the others that they might consider to be their peers? It is hard to come up with a measure of ROI, and one way to step towards that might be to calibrate. And that would be to say, look, if you are the MacArthur Foundation, what constitutes your peer? Is it Ford Foundation? Then let's go measure them and compare you. And we can do that next week.
Right. And that's a really good segue as we need to start wrapping up here into what are we going to talk about next week. So you're open for suggestions. Why don't you tell people how?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, first of all, come and you can find NodeXL here on the web at NodeXL Graph Gallery. There is a button at the top of the page that says Get NodeXL. You can also visit us at the Social Media Research Foundation, where you'll find information about our research. But if you would like to request a map, we'll make a sample map for any topic you ask for. Just visit us at connectedaction.net. You'll find a request button at the top of the page. That will lead you to another button, and that will lead you to a page where we'll ask you in a form, what would you like us to map? You tell us what you would like mapped and give us an email address to send it to and submit, and we'll send it back to you in, usually it takes less than 24 hours for the map to appear. I will note that we are mapping some interesting timely news. Certainly, there's a lot of interest in what's happening in changes at the Supreme Court, and we've been mapping discussions of the Supreme Court, and of particular interest may be the Friedrichs case. And so here you can see the Friedrichs with SCOTUS or court, and that highlights the following people as the mayors of that discussion: AFSCME, these other people, including the New York Times. Each of these people, I think this is the United Federation of Teachers, each of these people is very much at the center of a discussion of SCOTUS and Friedrich today.
Right. And for people that don't follow nonprofit advocacy specifically, this is a huge impact of an expected decision that was going to come down when Justice Scalia was, still on the bench and going to be contributing to a ruling that would change how union organizations would fund and have fair share. Huge importance to them. And now with Justice Scalia's death, this changes very quickly. So people go to social media to learn, what does this mean for me? I was expecting something different, and now I've got this very quick turnaround to understand what's going to happen, how does it impact our nonprofit advocacy work, all those things. And some of these mayors, maybe, you've heard of the New York Times and you were following them, but maybe you didn't know that AFSCME was kind of the leader in this conversation, and you'd want to start engaging with them if you've got questions about how it impacts the
That's right. So we hope to enable people to gain insight into complex streams of conversation with just a few clicks, so that in 30 seconds you could gain insight into 30,000 tweets. that in 3 hours reading those tweets, you would never finish them and really never come away with the answers to the core questions. Who is at the center of this conversation? What are they talking about? Are there divisions? Are there neighborhoods? What characterizes those neighborhoods? These are the kinds of things that we would like to be able to distill from a collection of annotated connections, which pretty much every message board or social media platform out there essentially creates the same pattern. People reply to people with messages. And if you give us a stream of that kind of data, this doesn't have to be Twitter. It could be anything. It could be email. It could be Facebook. It can be all sorts of things. Our goal is to essentially squeeze it, distill it, filter it, and come away with just the answers to the questions that we think that interested observers would really like, rather than the answer being, you should just read all those tweets, because apparently there are many of them.
Right. So we are about at the end of this week's episode, but we are planning to do this every week. So we would love to hear from people. We'll have links to the request a map feature, as well as several other things about NodeXL. But you can also tweet at us at Next Nonprofits to reach me. Mark, how can people find you on Twitter?
Right. I'm Mark with a C_Smith. And you can also find at NodeXL. That's NODE, letter X, letter L.
Outstanding. Mark, I'll look forward to talking to you next week.
All right. Thanks so much for the interest. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.